Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but underneath are ravenous wolves. By their fruits you will know them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Just so, every good tree bears good fruit, and a rotten tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a rotten tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit will be cut down and thrown into the fire. So, by their fruits you will know them." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Today, in the first reading, the second book of Kings, we hear narrated a very significant moment in the life of the people of Israel. So we go back to Mount Zion, and there God makes a covenant with the people of Israel. Moses receives the covenant. He reads the covenant. These are the 10 commandments. By this, living out this and following these 10 commandments, we show that truly he is our God and we are his people. But now time has passed, generations after generations. We have the destruction of the temple. We have the exile. And now there's this moment of grace where and the people of Israel are now rebuilding the temple. Now, symbolically of the temple being destroyed is that really a lot of their religious practice were lost. A lot of the links to the covenant made between God and Israel were lost. And now we hear of they're rebuilding the temple, and also they find a book. Well, a scroll. It's called the Book of the Covenant, but it's really scrolls. They don't have books as we think of it, books. No, it's more scrolls. They find scrolls, and then the priest, the high priest, gives it to the scribes. And they go to the king. Look what we found there, and they read. And what they're reading are the Book of the Covenant. So basically, especially the part of Exodus chapter 20 to 23rd. Let's recall that chapter 20, verse 1 to 17 is the 10 Commandments. Exodus 20, 24 to 26 is the instructions on worship and how to build the altar of the Lord. Exodus 21 and 23, it's all about interpersonal relationship, social justice. How am I supposed to relate with others, the property, private property, and so many things. But they're just rules of how to live life, starting with the 10 Commandments. So as the King Josiah, is looking at this, whoa, hold on. He convokes everyone into the temple that was just rebuilt and has the Book of the Covenant read. And after that, it says, okay, let's renew our covenant. Let's do this. Our forefathers, and through time and the struggles that happen and wars and things that unfolded in our lives, it's time for us to renew our covenant. So they go through this purging process of taking all the idols, the pagan idols out, and renewing the religious practices and following the covenant. And so it happens. We have this religious revival. It's interesting that if you read about this religious revival that has happened in Israel, led by King Josiah, it's really a religious revival is a relationship revival. How should we relate with God, the God who made a covenant with us? How should we relate with each other? Because we have a God who is in relationship with us. And you could also add, how do you relate with yourself? So we go back to the commandment, the fulfillment of the law and the prophets as revealed by Jesus Christ. Love God above all things, neighbor as self. So really, a religious revival It's a relationship revival. How do we relate to each other? Now, a couple of points coming from this reading is, one, the importance of not losing the covenant book again. And in many ways, that's one of the roles entrusted to the church and her magisterial teaching, not just to preserve the book of the covenant and the many teachings that comes from the Lord, but also to cultivate them and to deepen in our relationship with God. And here is the prophetic role of the church, that even if no one is listening, she must continue her prophetic voice, her being the conscience of the human race. That even if no one is listening, she has a duty, a responsibility. She should and must continue to preach and preach in prophetic ways. Indeed, it doesn't take much to say, wow, as we look around our society, our nation, the world, yes, we are definitely in need of a revival. From treating human dignities from natural conception to natural death, how do we relate with others? How do we highlight and value the dignity of every human being, regardless of language, race, many of the obstacles and barriers that we put on? A society that has put greater value in the choice of an individual over the common good, yes, we are in need of revival. And when you look at the many issues that surround our nation and the world, wow, we are in need of religious revival. But when we say this, it's almost like we're looking outside, expecting this King Joshua to come or some kingly figure to lead us in this revival. But part of the church understanding is the king is Jesus Christ. And he has come and he is still here and among us. So in our desire, when we see outside the world and read the news and the political debates and all the different philosophies, the secular world where so much garbage is going on. Well, it's easy to point fingers outside, but we also have to go inside. Because the king is still alive and still present and among us. And it's not King Yahshua, but King Joshua, Jesus. God saves. So if a religious revival is a relationship revival, and you want a religious revival, then make sure that you're reviving your relationship with the king, yourself. And to live out in the role of the church, a prophetic role, to speak truth, to remind of the covenant, to remind ourselves that there is a God. There is a way we relate with God. There is a way that we relate with God as to then relate with each other, including oneself. So as we long for religious revival, let us not forget that indeed it is a relationship revival. Recently, I was reading an article from Father Joseph Kentinish, the founder of the Schoenstatt movement, and it was a letter addressed to diocesan priests, and it's part of a conference that he gives, and he's going back to the need to renew our first love. See, part of a religious revival is a relationship revival. To go back to when you first encountered Jesus, when he became real for you for the first time. And to go there as to remember. See, part of the religious practice that we follow as a Catholic Church is do this in memory of me, the Holy Eucharist, Christ the King present, body, blood, soul, and divinity. But in many ways, there's a Eucharistic reality in each of our lives, a memorial reality that must be renewed. Do you remember when you first encountered Jesus? When you first felt in love with him? Go back to that place. Renew it. Revive that relationship with him. And in doing so, you will naturally get a religious revival. But renew your relationship. Go back to that first love. And from going there, preserving the book of the covenant, a book that's been written in your own personal life of how God reveals himself to you. and how he's guided you, what to do, what not to do, how to relate to him, how to relate to others, how to relate to yourself. So going back to our first love, so then as to cultivate that love is meant to grow, not just to cultivate it, but to deepen in it. So our first love, that book of the covenant, that book of our relationship that's been written in our hearts, need to be renewed, needs to be cultivated, needs to be deepened. And in doing so, we will not only be experiencing a religious revival, but we then will be acting in the role of Mother Church, leading by example of what it is to live in a relationship with God, relationship with others, relationship with self. It's easy to wait for some kingly figure to come. He has come already. He is here, is Jesus Christ, the King of the universe. How you relate to him and how you bear fruits that will inspire others to also renew their relationship with God and therefore to have a religious revival. So instead of waiting outside and putting on responsibility on someone, something out there, you got to start with yourself. And therefore, the gospel today. The gospel today finishes by their fruits you will know them. Are you bearing fruits that will lead and inspire a religious revival? Are you living life and bearing fruits that will lead others to a revival of relationship with God, with others, and self? May we truly experience a religious revival, and may it be led by each one of us having a relationship revival with our Lord.